Bosses of Reddit, what's the craziest thing you've seen an employee do? Caught my boss getting a BJ from one of the saleswomen. She didn't realize her heels were visible from the 3 inches gap between the floor and front panel on his desk. I said nice shoes, Vicky, turned around, and walked out. Watched a cashier ring up his friend and pretty much give him everything for free. Nobody likes the store, but don't make it so obvious. HR hired an employee to work on the mine I manage. He showed up 45 minutes late wearing shorts and Crocs. I proceeded to fire him on the spot. Got a framed letter from corporate jokingly congratulating me for having the shortest tenured employee in company history. Edit. Spelling. I manage a small weld shop. Generally, I don't care about less than clean background checks or pot, as long as you come into work every day and get it done. Finding reliable welders is difficult, so a lot of it flies. This sometimes leads to weird employees. This one guy we hired stopped showing up after like 3 days. He walks in the door. He's bright red from being sunburned to it, and his clothes are torn to shreds. Dude was drinking on a little aluminum boat and somehow got lost at sea. He looked like Tom Hanks from Castaway. He didn't have cell phone reception, so he wasn't able to call me. He did take a bunch of pictures over the few days he was lost at sea, though, including one where he was being rescued by the Coast Guard. I gave him the rest of the week off. Coast Guard took him to the hospital. He checked himself out and immediately came into work. Didn't even go home and shower. Odd dude. Guy that worked for me was getting out of his car one morning and saw one of the other managers in the company, so started talking to him. In the middle of the conversation he whipped his D out and started peeing on the side of his car. He was 37 years old, sober, and it was 8 in the morning. This was for a corporate job. Had a see-through water bottle that was filled with vodka. He started the day off fine but was legless by lunch. Drove him home, 40 mins each way, because he couldn't afford a cab. Talked the owner out of firing him and instead we helped him get into a program. That was 4 years ago. He's the production manager now. Model employee now, in fact. I once fired a guy and he tried to go back to work. His crush was in the clock-in room when I had to tell him to leave again. He cried on my shoulder as I walked him out of the building. Not because I fired him but because I told him to leave in front of his crush. Edit. Just for clarification, I meant a woman he found attractive, not the delicious soda brand. However, I could understand crying for the orange goodness. I was doing a weekly call monitor on one of my better employees and found he was doing an Indian accent. I was a bit surprised, so I went back and listened to 5+ calls of his from that week and found he was doing different impressions for almost every call. Arnold Schwarzenegger, Mickey Mouse, Apple from The Simpsons, pretty solid Christopher Walken, and a few others. In the Navy we had a broken accommodation ladder. It's a stairway attached to the ship for embarkation and debarkation that isn't always used if there is a brow on the pier. It was due for inspection and rather than fail the inspection the guys just unbolted it and let it fall overboard. Back in the retail book industry in ages past I had this employee. He would take a bathroom break anytime an employee got called into the office. Why? Well, because he had discovered, somehow, that if you went to the men's room and stood on the toilet and lifted one of the ceiling tiles, you could sort of make out conversations in the manager's office that was adjacent. He also discovered during one of his frequent smoke breaks that there was an access hallway for ground maintenance. This was in a shopping mall of sorts that also had a ladder that went to the roof. He'd occasionally vanish and basically go sit on the roof. If no one could find him, he couldn't get in trouble, he figured. I was a supervisor at a bulk food store. Had a staff member who was responsible for sweeping the floors. He would regularly snack on what he swept up. A girl in a non-clinical pediatric hospital job. She was like 19/20 and kind of weird. Apparently she had a crush on me, but I brushed it off because she was weird and obviously that was unprofessional. I knew she came from a relatively messed up home, but she was fairly normal outside of being goofy and awkward. One day she got caught giving a patient a blowjob in his room and my first thought was, oh my god, this is a pediatric hospital, but luckily for her the patient was 18. There are some kids with congenital disorders who see specialists all their life and aren't just suddenly dropped on their 18th birthday. They sort of slowly transition, and he was one of them. That was unfortunately the beginning of the end for her, as life became a train wreck afterward. She soon got knocked up by someone else, gained like 100-150 lbs and had a severely autistic child. She is constantly posting on Facebook and it's the saddest it ever. Like, anyone want to have a play date with and I? 0 comments or likes. Then randomly she'll just have massive breakdowns about how hard it is to have a severely autistic child who can barely walk. Her kid is 4-5 and how she has no friends or anything. It's horribly sad. Back when I was a gas station clerk, my manager would deal drugs while on the clock. He'd take people into the back office to talk to. We all knew what he was doing, mostly because he all but admitted it, and because we all knew. Someone eventually said something and then the company tried to make him take a drug test. He just quit instead. A guy went for his lunch break and came back drunk. We were delivery drivers. When I was a kid working at a grocery store, another cashier would often buy and then chug a half gallon of milk to get sick to go home. Job was horrid, so it was entertaining at the time. As a sergeant in the army, my unit was out on a 2-week field exercise. One of my soldiers decided to drink a dozen boxes of shelf-stable whole milk. He gets sick and has to go back to the rear. We find out later that he is quite lactose intolerant and knew it for years before going to the field. He bragged to some of his buddies about the scam and one of the other NCOs heard him. That started the investigation that got him demoted for malingering. We had a guy that would vanish in the middle of the day for roughly 3-4 hours, then return at the end of the day. Come to find out he would go home during that time, play with his dogs, smoke weed and then come back to work. When we had to sit him down and explain he couldn't just leave, he totally flipped out and told us all to go F ourselves and to effing fire him. He got a warning and still works here, and HR still does nothing when he disappears. Went out for smoke breaks like 5x a day, eventually got to a point where he couldn't wait to get outside and would light up in the elevator to get a head start. 2 days after that mishap he took his lunch break and came back very drunk. I think he worked a grand total of 7 days hired to fired. Was cashier manager at big box store. There was a useless kid that finally stopped showing up. A few days go by, and I see him walk in. So I assume he's going to come up front and we can do the whole formal exit process since he missed shifts. He never comes up front. Nobody has heard from him. So a few weeks go by and we just terminated him. We go back to the lunchroom one day, and useless kid is sitting there. I ask what he's doing and he says he's on break. I'm like, lol, no, you stopped showing up weeks ago and were terminated. He leaves to go back to work. I confirmed with all managers he was fired, not working in another part of the store. He shows up in the lunchroom again a few weeks later. Turned out he didn't want to tell his mom he doesn't want to work. He kept letting her drop him off. He'd hang in the lunchroom for a bit because his mom apparently is friendly with another employee. So this way it looks like he still has the job to his mom. We noticed that she was falling asleep a lot at work, so that got all of our attention. She usually took 10-minute naps through the day, which isn't a big deal because you can have breaks. But our alarms went up. One of the employees heard a crinkling beer can in the bathroom one day, saw her come out the bathroom and check the trash cans 10 minutes later. Beer confirmed. Also some weird blood spots on paper towels too. We searched her belongings and found several other beer cans and a funnel. Noticed that she didn't have any alcohol on her breath. MFW, we realized she was butt chugging the Miller High Life to get lit at work. I had an employee call a French woman a frog and then start rebiting. That was kinda awkward. Used to work with this girl that would watch porn as she was operating her machine. She'd prop her phone up on the control board and just watch as if it was a sitcom or summit. Co-workers went to her supervisor to let him know and he had to have a sit down with her. She was oblivious to the fact that watching shows on your phone while you work was prohibited, let alone Pornhub. Saw a dude fall asleep on a stand-up forklift. How tired must you be to do that? Company hired a contractor to take on some database development. The guy was hired as senior database engineer, contract to hire. He was 53, so he's had experience. He proceeded to do so bad on a project that we had to ask forgiveness from a client, refund all their support hours, and have our junior developer, who was later promoted due to good work, redo the contract as 2-month project. It took the junior dev 1 week, 35 hours, full stop. Took a temp job leading the Santa's village at Base Pro while waiting on my contract to start at my career job. The people you hire are usually interesting. One girl on her first shift was on her phone as I walked back to the department. I wasn't in uniform yet but told her, "You aren't supposed to be on your phone on shift." She screams, "Who the FK are you?" I walked away, clocked in, wrote her up, and came back to her with write-up. She turned out to be one of the better employees. I had an employee call and tell me her mother died. Well, I got an anonymous phone call from someone telling me she was lying, so I called the number I had on file to send my regards and I get an address to send flowers. In the meantime, the office had collected an envelope of money to help with the costs of the funeral and missing work. When I called, the mother answered and was shocked to find out her daughter used her death as an excuse to go to Vegas for the weekend. When she returned, I held a big meeting with everyone in the office and presented her with the envelope of money and flowers. She took it and faked cried. I called her into my office to reveal that I knew and fired her and took the envelope back. She said she don't give a duck and left. Capital H. The owner's nephew was brought on to be an assistant manager. In the same night he ducked some random floozy on the office desk, on top of the staff paychecks, and when we closed up for the night, he stumbled into the bar next door where I was having a nightcap with industry friends. He didn't see me but he threw his credit card down and said, "I'm a club owner. I drink for free here." He kept shouting that until he was asked to leave. He didn't last long. Not too crazy, but pretty stupid. I had a girl that worked for me at a mortgage company pull the credit report of her ex-boyfriend's new girlfriend. No idea how she got her social security number, and then went on the girl's Facebook page posting messages about all of her debt and past due accounts and the crappy kinds of car that she drives, etc. Got an angry call from the girl who ended up being a pain in my butt for a while. Edit. Forgot an interesting part. We fired the girl, and about a week later an agent from the Department of Treasury comes in asking questions about the girl. Turns out, she was being investigated for a series of fraudulent things, including operating as a loan officer without a license, and taking out a bunch of federal student loans in her grandfather's name. He wanted information because in investigating learned that she had been fired from the company for some sort of malfeasance, and he wanted the details. She went to jail for a while eventually. The owner made me cut hours while keeping his son on at full time. As a silent protest, everyone took an extra long smoke break that day. When I went outside to corral the troops, I overheard the craziest thing. An employee defending me against the charges I was a weak ass kisser who failed to stand up for them. He's gotta feed his family just like everybody else. And she continued to defend me even after the others labeled her a quisling. Which was really crazy given the state of education in America. I'm shocked they even knew what that meant. I caught the CEO having sex with the clinical director in a post-op bed in a surgical unit. I was COO. 3/5 members of my team were caught sleeping multiple times, twice in front of clients. The other 2 team members actually took pictures. They knew they were in the wrong but kept it up anyway. I finally got the pictures. Showed them to my boss. He called a meeting. In said meeting, the 3 of them argued that their privacy was invaded and who took the pictures and this is unacceptable. I simply said, "You're sleeping on the job, and we are giving you a warning." They do good work, and I didn't want them to lose their jobs over a really stupid mistake. To today, those 3 guys feel like they were outed and snitched on. Super Target Deli. Had an employee eat food from the deli in the walk-in freezer, which was the only place without cameras. He was shivering and holding an entire meatloaf, mouth full. I couldn't stop laughing. Not a boss, but used to work for a MSP. They had an office with a big tile missing in the ceiling. Apparently they had this accountant who was working late one night. Next day, everyone comes into the office and they find said ceiling hole. Turns out, The accountant heard God calling her from the ceiling. She proceeded to climb up a desk, into the ceiling, and managed to get into one of the offices next door. Had an employee that was always falling asleep while riding around from job to job. It was time for him to get his CDL for the company and had to travel about 2 hours away for testing. Halfway into his trip we checked where he was and the truck had been running for an hour, about 45 minutes from the test site. At a truck stop. Had to call a gas station attendee go wake him up. Still hadn't contacted me. About 30 minutes later we get a call from a guy that he had run off the road. The company name and number is on the side of the truck. We checked the GPS and it showed him driving 70 miles per hour down to 20 miles per hour right around the time the incident happened. He ended up passing his test and making it back to the shop. I asked him what the duck is he on? Heroin? He said, no, I was smoking meth all night. Honesty isn't always the best policy. Had an employee go for a drug test, mandatory for all drivers with a CDL. He used his 10-year-old son's urine and warmed it up on the defroster in his car on the way to the test center. The center called and told us they were surprised he was alive. His urine was 130 degrees. Needless to say, he wasn't employed much longer. This guy always tried to hide at work to avoid working. One day I was looking for him and I stepped into the bathroom. I notice a shoe print on the back of the toilet, and I look up and one of the ceiling tiles is pushed a little to the side. I climb up there, and this mother ducker is hiding in the ceiling. I was a valet captain at an expensive restaurant with a parking lot 2 blocks away, and one of the valets I was supervising took a wrong turn in a customer's 2016 Audi R7 and ended up getting pulled over and arrested for going 110 in a 70 on the interstate. I have so many stories about this dude. Me and my former boss interviewed him for a position in IT and I got a really weird vibe, but my boss was really impressed by his CV. Lots of stuff like Cisco certification course teacher. And I was about to quit, so I didn't really put up a fight about it and he was hired. Day 2. He brought in a 3 feet long RC helicopter and put it in his office. Day 3. He was told to order a laptop for himself. Part of the job was ordering its stuff, and bought the most expensive computer he could find. I'm talking titanium and a $10K price tag. Day 4. He ordered an office chair in leather with built-in massage stuff. Day 5. Big argument with my boss and he was told he couldn't do anything without me approving it first. Day 8. He told me he wanted to apply for public IPs for every single piece of equipment at all the company offices. Several thousand IPs, because NAT sucked. Turns out he didn't know what it was. Cisco teacher, remember. Day 9. He changed the domain admin password to a password some dudes at a Ike channel had told him was the most secure password in the world. Around day 15, he told me he needed time off cause his girlfriend had left him for his RC heli instructor and he was scared she would take stuff from their apartment. There is so much more. He was fired a few weeks after I left. Last I heard he was selling VPN services to people using his own home broadband connection. I am a supervisor for a pretty strict no-nonsense German company. A lot of our employees have a constant feeling of despair, and let it be known. Some situations that have happened are below. 1. Poop smeared all over the bathroom stalls every day for weeks. 2. Carvings in the bathroom wall of tyranny. Despair. Certain manager is not God. Competing company pays much better etc. 3. Admittedly the company treats employees badly. An employee's car was totaled when a neglected light pole fell on it. The company refuses to pay for it and it has been in the parking lot for months. After about 2 months every single manager in the building had their expensive cars keyed. I wasn't the manager yet but was still working with her. I came into work one morning and she was sleeping in the chair. I tried waking her up but it didn't work. Called a friend at our sister hotel and she came and woke her up. She was very disoriented. She drank while at work and it was obvious she mixed stuff in a 2-liter. She then quit and then a little bit later they rehired her. I didn't think it was such a good idea but they still did it and she ended up being a no-call no-show. Not a boss, but one guy I used to work with was mentally unstable as we later found out. At first he seemed normal, but after a while he just kind of snapped. Started talking about just wait till my dead brother gets here and were gonna shoot up the place, and also warned my mom, the secretary, it's a family business. He was gonna go get a gun and light up my brother. Told the secretary that he wished there was a firefighter type pole leading from the upstairs office to the shop floor so he could land on a specific guy's head and jump up and down yelling punish, punish, punish. One day he taped up the windows in the garage door separating two sections of our building. He would routinely hit walls and part washers. One of the strangest things was after a bad storm one night, he came into work and apologized to my dad, the boss man, for the storm. It was his fault because he got angry and broke a walking stick, which made God mad and sent the storm as a punishment. After we finally got rid of him, after he ended up being put in a psych ward, my parents were in our small hometown about 30 minutes away visiting family, and they saw him at a gas station. On the way home he chased them down, and my dad pulled over to get out and find out what he wanted. Not a smart idea, I know. Turns out he wanted to apologize for everything and that he was back on new meds to help it all and ask for his job back. Before we went crazy, he was a really nice guy. Him and I got along really well. But guess sometime you never know. Not an employer, but mine sure was pissed. We had a co-worker that called out of work left early all the time, bawling her eyes out, because her dad was in and out of the hospital, in very bad condition. We all felt so bad for her, rushed to cover her shifts, offered whatever we could do to help. Shortly after I got a different job, I heard she had called out for a whole week, because her dad had died and she had to help plan the funeral. The company sent their condolences. We all offered our help some more. A few days later, another co-worker checked this girl's Snapchat and found dozens of pictures of her and her friends going out to clubs and partying all week. Shortly after she brought us up to the GM, they saw her dad walking around the mall our store was in. They talked to him and found out he'd never even had the flu that whole time, much less been in the hospital. She got fired and then text spammed the other co-worker to please talk to the GM. I know I ducked up, but please you gotta help me. I'm not a boss, but I worked as a bouncer at this bar venue that did special events. This one night we had the Chippendales strippers come to an event. We had a new guy start on this shift who was a bit older than the rest of the employees. During the show he starts stripping in the crowd, collecting tips instead of working. The Chippendales manager gets pissed and starts yelling at him, saying he's stealing his strippers' money. After that he stops stripping but keeps just flirting with women in the crowd and not working at all. Near the end of the night we start cleaning up and notice we can't find a new employee. Someone takes the trash out to the dumpster and sees he's ducking some chick in his car. 20 minutes later he walks back like nothing happened, but then instead of helping finish cleaning gets in an argument that lasts the rest of the shift with one of the bartenders because I guess he was sexually harassing her all night. Also find out he is married and has a kid. My boss called him in and fired him the next day. He didn't understand why. Was middle management at my old job. I had a team below me, but plenty of awful people above me. Had one of my people specifically request only closing shifts because it was easier on her family for childcare purposes. After a month of this, she itched at my ducking awful boss about no shift diversity. He talked with me about it, ignored that fact that she had requested it, and demanded I give her day shifts. So I gave her 3-day shifts. She missed all of them. Blamed me for not giving her the night shifts she wanted. My duckwad boss yelled at me for giving her day shifts too, despite me telling him this would happen when he forced me to do it initially. Fired the girl for missing so many shifts. She recruited 5 guys, the fathers of her various children, to come yell at me for ruining her source of income. Referred to her Chinese customer's baby as a cute little chunky when my co-worker, who also happens to have Asian heritage, pointed out that it was incredibly racist. The employee replied, "Oh, it's fine, my boyfriend is black, the weird part is he was Filipino, not black," as if it excuses racism anyway. She was shocked when we didn't renew her contract. Well, I'm not a boss anymore, but I got a story. Worked at a wing zone in college, managed for a little while, had a sport high energy kid working as cook one night. He was into science experiment type pranks. One night when I wasn't paying attention to him and focused on orders going out, he got caught up on his cooking and wanted to eat dinner. He went next door to Publix and bought something to eat along with some dry ice they keep stored by the freezer section. He had talked up making a dry ice bomb earlier, which I figured he would do outside. But once he got back he disappeared. He and a driver ran out front and grabbed me on the way out. Once we got out of the store there was the loudest sound I've heard. Like shotgun blast or firecracker shot at close range, and all the doors in the store and walk-in cooler flew open for a second when the blast hit. We go back in and walk into the cooler. Nothing seemed any different though, and the dry ice nom was gone. Finally someone looks up and behold, a 20-ounce bottle stuck straight into the stainless steel ceiling of the cooler. The kid had to hang his weight on it to pull it out. I can't say I was mad because no one or thing was hurt and it's not my store. I was impressed and encouraged the scientific spirit. Just next time, do it outside. It's people like that kid that make life kind of fun. I hope he became a badass science teacher. She angrily defecated on my desk after I wrote her up for hiding in the bathroom for 2 hours to play Candy Crush. One of my employees had a bonfire at his house. I was there with some of the other employees till pretty late. Got a call early the next morning from the employee that was at the party who was supposed to open. Said he was sick and wasn't going to be to come in. Dude, I just saw you a few hours ago. Remember? You had better be at work. I ended up firing him a few months later. Be a productive worker and ask for more projects once they finish what they work on. They're mad, I tell ya. I had an employee who had sex regularly in the bathroom. He said, "Is there a problem? That keeps me sane if I am stressed." I was speechless. I worked in a call center, which should be all that needs to be said. I once caught an agent cutting out lines of coke and then snorting them. I caught countless agents breaking apart pot to roll up in joints, blunts, pack a bowl. I had a girl walk into one of my training sessions, grab the wastebasket, and proceed to pull all of her weave out. Had a girl disappear from my training class and we later found her passed out in a puddle of her own piss and vomit in the handicapped stall in the bathroom. Had a lady who was too damn lazy to get up and walk to the restroom, so she decided to just shit her pants at her desk, then proceed to shake the turd out of her pants leg. I have so many stories from that place I have seriously considered writing a screenplay. Not an employer boss, but I used to work at a bank in the UK and the forklift driver went on the tannoy as the store was closing. "This is a customer announcement. Could you all pick up your things and duck off out of the store? We all need to go to the pub. Thank you." As he turned round, the store manager was behind him. You can imagine what happened.